This is Talking in Stations. It is episode number 35, if our numbering is now consistent, of the Invasion expansion. I am Artemis Albosa, a member of NOIR. Joining me today we have RonUSMC, a member of Test Alliance Please Ignore.
Hey guys.
Also joining me today, a very special guest, Seddow, a member of Test Alliance Please Ignore, and in fact he is their most recent Sky Marshal.
Hello.
So, for those unfamiliar with the term, what is a Sky Marshal? What do you do?
So my job the past 4 or 5 months has been in the Southern War, basically leading it, making decisions on timers, what timers we go for, how we play the war, what do we try to do to win the war, basically. Basically, I have full control over the military for the process of the war. There's still some decisions I can't make that I have to poke Billy for, etc. But for the most part, it's do what I do to think to win the war successfully.
And speaking of timers, despite the fact that we'll discuss it a bit later, many are saying that the Southern War is effectively over. There are still many a sovereignty timer up on the timer board. Can you walk us through a quick, Ron, Seddow, whichever of you has a strong opinion, why are people saying the war is effectively done? What's changed recently?
So pretty much, what, about a week or two ago, we we'd been on a good roll. We were taking about an iHub and Detorid or two every couple weeks. So like there was one week where we took about three. And so one day, Elo wasn't on at the time or something, and I was like, "Hey, let's form up." So we formed up. We went and refed the at the time current Chinese staging, O3 Tech 4. We reinforced that iHub, and we reinforced about all the iHubs in that constellation, TYV, etc. And we the next day our Fortizar came online in O3 Tech 4. We'd anchored a Fortizar right off their keepstar, and it came online there. They were planning to contest it, but they didn't end up contesting it at all. So the following day, it was a Saturday, I think. We'd been hyping up like, "Hey, we have a chance to take the O3 Tech Keepstar here," and apparently, the fraternity missed the memo along the lines of they thought we were going all in for the Keepstar armor timer, when in reality that was never the goal. The goal was to attempt to win the iHub timer. And when we realized we couldn't win the iHub timer, we said, huh, how do we take advantage of this? So the next thing we took advantage of was, okay, they're all piled into O3. They're staying in O3 because they don't want to leave O3 because we're camping the outways. We had more subcaps than they did, but they had a huge Titan force, about 224 Titans. And I think it was the full D scan. And so we weren't trying to push into O3. We weren't going to contest that. We're just like, all right, cool. How do we take advantage of this? So we ended up reinforcing. If you look on the map there, O3 Tech 4, every iHub to the left of it, about 25 to 26 different timers. Every single iHub got refed in the span of about an hour or two. They were all in O3 Tech 4, so they couldn't contest us. We weren't going to let them contest us. And then that following weekend, we formed up big, and we were able to take about I think it was 18 out of 20 iHubs or something like that. Um, and so basically taking 18 Detorid iHubs or even killing them was just a massive swing of things, because previously it was maybe 1 to 2 iHubs a week. Things were sort of slow and steady, but in a process of about 8 hours, which was the longest op I think we had all the war, we took almost all of Western Detorid. A big credit to this also was because Mango's army of Mango's, the Chinese that came over from Serenity, Fulcrum, and that group. Norris declared war on them. A bunch of internal cultural issues caused that to happen, and that allowed Mango's to start being on the offensive with us. Previously, Mango's could only be defensive. It was part of the agreement they had with fraternity, but now they could be offensive, and that basically just gave us an extra 250 bodies that we didn't have in a time zone where we were struggling to get bodies in the first place. So having that 250 bodies that we needed, you know, allowed us to be like, okay, holy crap! When we used to be outnumbered in mutant fleets, we're outnumbering them at like 1000 Eve time. So it was basically to where we had just been able to, I guess, blob them pretty much. They sort of put their own demise up. Their numbers were really good for the O3 armor timer, because they'd been rage pinging. They acted like it was the next UALX, pretty much. They told their members, "Hey, resub if you haven't. Call everyone online. Buy Titans now. Buy Plex now, etc." They were telling people to spend real life money to buy Plex and then buy Titans off of people because they were trying to get the most amount of Titans they could get. And then they got blue balled. Literally got no action that day except all of the Western iHubs got reinforced. And ever since then, their numbers have just been on the plummet. We took the western half of Detorid, and we took seven. And the next weekend, which was this past weekend, we took 77S, which was the big regional gate from Tenerife to Detorid. And then we also were able to take the O3 Tech 4 iHub because they can just not form anyone anymore. And the few fleets they have formed, they've just ended up feeding or losing. There was a fight this weekend over reinforcing the O3 Tech iHub where they fed about 40 billion and killed about 15 non-mutants. Um, it just seemed ever since they formed so hard, they just went on a downfall because of how hyped and how much importance they put on a timer. We actually weren't committing for it. Their line members don't really trust Norris anymore, as far as I can tell. They think that a lot of it's personal game. According to Fulcrum, who has a bunch of Chinese and fraternity spies that are up in the Winterco sort of leadership, they plan on falling back all the way back to drone regions. They're in cash right now. They're crashing on Iron Crown and Vindy's couch right now. They pretty much evac'd everything out of Detorid and Innsmother. Over the past week, we've killed 2 Sotiyos and countless amount of forts in Western Detorid, and slowly just going up. Um, Pretty much fraternities on the back pedal right now. They're moving everyone to E5T in cash is their current place, and then from there, in about 2 to 3 weeks, they're supposed to leave. They also are in the process of selling us 5 of their keepstars in Wicked Creek, Detorid, and one in Innsmother, because they would rather sell them than have them die. And we were able to cut some deals there and end up with some keepstars, which, to be honest, we are not complaining about. They ended up just on such a downhill slope so quickly that it plummeted their morale and everything to the floor.
I
The
mean,
Go ahead, Ron.
but like thinking about like the O3 Tech, um, you know, they assembled, and that really actually was like a scary force, right? Like 200 Titans, and
I agree. I
yeah, I
completely
mean
agree.
that was, and they set it up perfectly, right? Which is, if we went in, like, we were gonna have, like, at least 25% attrition, right? Like, it was beautiful in the sense that they had everything there, they were set up, they were ready to go, and they defended, that Keepstar and that iHub, perfectly. Like, that was brilliant. But, the problem with that, and like what Seddow said, which is they were so set up in that defense that, I think the other thing to mention is, so Seddow and I were running a lot of these, and I was doing like the Entosis, and Seddow would do, the subs and the supers and things. And, this stuff is at like 5 a.m., man. Like, this isn't, an
Yeah, this is
afternoon,
like
and we're
10 a.m.
having like a soda and we're talking to our friends. This is like 4:30 a.m., like freak, like crackhead hours. Like, it's crazy. So, I mean, it's like, and I'm running around doing Entosis, and Sedow's like, "Hey, man, how much longer? How much longer, man?" And I'm like, like,
I had
I'm
been
like, "We got
awake for
another
about
hour,
36
dude."
hours at that point, dude. So I was just wanting it to.
Right
But
on.
they were so set up in defense, they weren't ready for us. They thought that the only play we could make was at their keepstar, when in reality, it was just a distraction to reinforce everything that they were not prepared for us to reinforce. I think we hit 20 IHUBs in about an hour to 40 minutes, which is actually really insane. It was just something that was unexpected to them, and they're all sitting on their keepstar waiting for it to repair because they can't leave it. Because if they leave it, we will go and hit it. But if they sit there, then all their iHubs get reinforced. And at the time, we had like 6 Detorid iHubs in the western half, one about each constellation. And because we had one in each constellation, when all the timers ended up coming out, it allowed us to be able to sino around and move capitals, supers, wherever we needed to win the timers. That same weekend, we won the ISI hub, which was their Keepstar system. Now in the IS, Keepstar belongs to Horde, acting as a third party for all the Keepstar selling.
I think you made a very big point there about that you had a system in each of the constellations so that you could move your capitals. I know throughout the entire process of this war, many people, Villy was one of the most outspoken ones, as well as Ron on the show, that the Sino jammers and their mechanics, I think Villy called them anti-fun, is the way he described them, and it really slowed down Legacy's ability to make any sort of advance or breach into Detorid itself. But now you have those systems. You had one in each constellation, as you mentioned, you could move. And also, I want to ask, how did the impact of all of the lower ADMs as a result of Blackout hitting all of the VNIs getting nerfed into the ground, how did those lower ADMs impact the ability for you guys to make this final push, so to speak?
So originally, I think towards the end of Blackout, they moved their timers from. So they used to be vulnerability from 0530 to 1430. If it was an ADM2 system, which is max strategic index, so they've owned the system for more than 2 months, and they aren't crabbing in it. The military and industry index is at zero. So when they all drop to ADM2, that vulnerability is open from 0530 to 1430. So 1430 catches the early EU guys, some of the decent amount of the Russians, and 0530 catches some of the Chinese from Mangoes and some of the late night US guys, the Western US and those Eastern US guys like me who stay awake for it because it was usually good fights there. And so it was at 0530 and they were losing iHubs at 0530. We'd get an iHub reft at 0530 and we'd come back 2 days later. It would come out at like 0600 and they were losing because they couldn't form enough members. It wasn't good enough in their prime time. And then so they moved their timers from 0530 an hour later to 0630 to 1530, which made it to where we stopped going for late iHubs at like 0630. We were getting the EU guys on early and going on at 1630. Blackout made it to where almost all of the western half of Detorid was ADM2. So we had so many systems with vulnerability windows that we wanted to take, um, and we could. And then there used to be a time frame between like 0900 and 1100, 0800 to 1100, where we said we cannot do anything in this time zone. We're going to get outmanned, outgunned. We're going to get outformed. But when Mangoes joined the fun, we were outforming them. So it basically opened up all the time zones we needed to make a push against them. If you look on the Detorid map, the eastern half of Detorid, HZF 8FN area used to be all ADM6. Now it's just tanking. They haven't been able to crab safely. They haven't been able to do anything. Mangoes have been on the offensive, pushing them. Now they literally don't have any supers or Rorquals left in Detorid or Ensmer. They've all evac to cash.
If I remember correctly, there was a post that was leaked and reportedly linked and translated, and it read that they were evacing the majority of their groups, all the English speaking folk, to cash, but they were trying to maintain 3 ADM, level 3 ADM in Western Detrid. Does that is that of some sort of strategic significance, that 3 ADM?
The 3 ADMs just to slow us down. If they could maintain the 3, it means it's 30-minute ref instead of 20, and it means the iHubs will just take longer. It would just be a slowdown thing. So if they run all ADM2, we could have all the iHubs and Ensmother and Detorid in a week and a half or two. But if they keep the ADMs up somewhat, it makes it just give more time. Like at this point, they're so split between the English guys and the Chinese guys, and they moved all the English guys already to cash. They're trying to keep the Chinese and QRFJ, but in a coalition that size, you can't really do that. You gotta have, ideally, in a coalition, you can cover all time zones, and they're splitting up their time zones to where they can't. And you know, they move so many people into cash right now. I've watched the Supers and Titans move that there's no way they can put up an effective defense for Dead or Mother anymore unless they do a significant pre-move back into those regions. Um, I know the English side. I know that Moonpire, a guy who has about 80 Cloaky campers who Cloaky camped Dead and Mother throughout the whole war, he moved everything to cash because they started riding in cash. So all the system in cash are now camped. My SIG DKS has been putting pressure on the English guys in cash. They've been complaining. They even sent out a ping yesterday saying how shit and terrible their morale was. It just has not been a great time for them, and the split between Detorid and Cash is just going to slow us down in the end of things.
There is a part of me that wonders if the the split is more of they need to prepare cash for the entire alliance to move in, but if they all go there at once, they're worried that you're going to continue to push and continue to follow them instead of working your way up more slowly and clearing all the Sov and things like that. Instead, you're going to push up and try and like land a killing blow on their coalition, so to speak.
That is a completely fair statement, and it's a way to look at it. But in my eyes, I see it as the English guys are going there to hopefully set up a home briefly, and then Winterco proper, the fraternity, and most of the Chinese guys will evac to Cash, and then 2 to 3 weeks later from Cash they will move out into Oasa or somewhere further up in the drone lands, maybe near Vinavinavici, those guys. Um, it has already been stated in some of the pings that I've seen that Winterco does not intend to stay in Cash. Cash is home to Iron Crown and Vindicative. I don't know, Vindictive, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they intend to keep that home, and they're just letting Fraternity cash on the couch, pretty much. But they do not intend to stay in cash. They are in full retreat mode. They've been pinging the past about week for move ops for the Chinese now too, and for the English side. The English side's been going about 2 weeks. The Chinese side started about a week ago to use the Sino chain and use the Titan bridge chain all the way back to cache. They anchored a keepstar and ends mother to allow. There was a gap in their keepstar chain, and they anchored one about 2 weeks ago to complete that chain to start the evac route.
But I mean, it's the best move they can do, right? Like, I
I
mean,
agree.
if
I agree.
you, yeah, I mean, if you like flip it around, right? So, and if you think, really, when Pandemic Horde kind of left them hanging, right? And then, I think the PL and that kind of slowed down on their side as well, and just kind of left them there. And then right around the same time, we got the Army of Mangoes, right? And then we kind of bolstered our forces. Like, I think it's the smart move, right? Because selling the keep stars, yeah, they're cheap, but you know what? At least you're getting something from it, right? Like,
Yeah.
rather than just
I
letting them die. Yeah,
If I was in their shoes, the only thing I probably would have done is I would have been on. Looking back at it, I think they could have coordinated better with PL and Horde to keep them more interested. But it seemed like they were just telling them, "Hey, come down south. There's much to do," and then they sort of had to find their own content. They weren't really coordinating timers or anything. Um, and we knew with the support of PL and Horde, we were going to struggle or make no progress at all. So our main goal was to make every time they came down here living hell. And I think we succeeded in that pretty well. Um, Nowadays, they've abandoned them. Snuffed Out has moved out of the region, back up north. It seems to Vale. Uh, I would just put it as if I was in their shoes, I would completely agree with everything they're doing, except maybe I would have done it sooner. Um,
yeah, yeah. So I'm with you. It's that is kind of one thing that's interesting, right? Like, but because we do the same thing, right? Like, that's a very common tactic that if someone third parties, like you hit them first because you want them to have a really bad time so they don't come back. And and another time I noticed that was on Wednesday, right? When Army of Mango, their first big battle with us, like they were targeting them first. I mean, it was nice for us, but you know, it's like they just want to punish, that one particular group. So I mean, that's kind of common. I think that is a good point that maybe someone could have coordinated more or been like a camp counselor for him or a camp activity director, right? That, hey, you guys go here and do this and do that and help us, kind of push this. I think, at this point for them, you know, like looking back, like wherever they go to war next, it's going to be something to watch because they've learned all the tricks, right?
and to
I
be
mean, some of the tricks that
honest,
we've learned the hard way, right? Like the little Astra that could, right? We learned that from Snuff when they did that to us at UALX, man, and that sucked, right?
yeah,
So
I I put a keepstar, or I put an Astra this week on the English staging and cache P7 tech in off their keepstar there, and they rage pinged so hard to kill it, and then I anchored one another one the next day, and it went online. Well, it's in the anchoring process. Sorry, they definitely learned from the mistakes. I think the move for them now is Norris needs to rebuild some bridges that he burnt down, and he needs to basically they need to regroup. And right now they're spread thin between about three regions, and they're trying to get everyone consolidated in one so they can move out of that one region all the way back up. Um, I think he just needs to rebuild some bridges, regroup, crab for a little bit, and see where they are from there. We've already Billy put a post on Reddit that got a lot of hate, trying to find new groups to eventually move into Wicked Creek scouting, who would want to just live there and be on good terms with Tess, but not Blue, sort of ideal. Basically saying, if you want to live here, we don't want the space, but we'll let you live here, and we won't come burn down your shit. We might come fight you every now and then, but we aren't going to burn down your shit.
That is one
And
thing
there's already
I'm
been a
very curious about because we saw when the North, when PanFam was booted out of Tribute and Vale in that area, no one really moved in, and the Imperium didn't stay there to prevent any smaller groups from moving in that weren't necessarily friendly with them, right? They didn't install a friendly organization, everybody just sort of let it alone. Mostly because drifters, I think, but that's beside the point. So
yeah.
when that occurred, just a bunch of these smaller entities sort of moved in and have been having a sort of fight club up there. You'll see various posts from Lord Servant, who's a member of one of the alliances up there, where he sort of gives battle reports from his point of view that are rather amusing. And I'm wondering
Kendar is over
if,
there with Trigger Happy.
yeah, exactly. We even did a show on them on the Sunday show one time with all those little groups. So my question is, if you guys can't find large groups that you want that are going to be friendly with you to install there, do you think this is an area of space where that sort of thing could happen again? And if so, is that something you're comfortable living next to?
So the way the geography set up there, if you go to the actual like map, it would end up working really well, to be honest. I really love what's happened up in Tribute, Pureblind, Vale area, because it's all these small 60, 70 man fights, and those are the fights I love. I really love what has happened up there. These small groups have been, hey guys, there's an opening in space, let's go grab it. And I would love for that to happen in scouting past Wicked Creek, and we'd be fine with that happening. Um, we wouldn't come in and like kill their structures. They'd probably have fights between each other. It'd be something we're open to. I know Fire has some desire to take parts of Detorid and parts of Inmother, but that's up to Fire Coalition to decide, not what for us to decide. From our perspective, Wicked Creek and Scouting Pass will be open to whoever wants to move in. Um, just it's one of those things where I know Billy's already gotten a decent amount of responses from people saying, "Yeah, we might move down here. Would we be on good terms, etc." That post he put out was not to ask people to be blue with him. It was to be like, I know that's how everyone took it, but it was basically to be like, "Hey, if this space is about to be open, let me know if you want it, so we can coordinate it together." If you look at the map, Wicked Creek and Scouting is very far away from Amencia, not that far away from Catch with the oh shit curse gate, but from Amencia, from like all the legacy space, is pretty far away. So we wouldn't end up bumping heads a lot, if any.
Right on. I'm definitely looking forward to see what happens in that region. I'm personally my biggest hope is that some way or another, some groups that used to be like rental organizations, like corporations or alliances who used to be part of rental empires, that sort of blackout hit and maybe the rental empire didn't do what they wanted it to anymore, what have you, they decide, you know what, there's space open now. Let's try to strike it out on our own. Because as much as I like the renter model, I think it's very much an Eve thing to have occur. I also really like the idea of having those groups strike it out on their own and try the actual Sovnal thing without bankrolling someone else for their defense. That is my
Yeah.
personal like what I hope to have happen.
I would love to see that too, just from my perspective, because those like 60, 70 man fights and seeing those small alliances grow in an area where they can, it'd be great to see. And it's not space we intend to keep. We may keep one or two systems for jump bridges, but is not something we're gonna be like, oh, we're gonna move everything to Wicked or we're gonna own Wicked just because fuck it. It's just too far away and too much of a hassle for us to own. We want to push Fraternity out. We've successfully done it. The next part is pushing them out of cash, and then once they're out of cash, then the whole goals of the war from our perspective are done. The next parts would be establishing new groups in those regions who we're on good terms with. Um, and then it's just regroup, rebuild, relax for a little bit. We've been at war for almost a year now.
You
Um,
know, the one thing about that I mean, I would love like these small groups, just to have a fight club. And, if, we have like DDFCs or whatever, FC's like, hey, take 30 guys and go up there, right? Not 500-man Goku fleets, to go and just shred them. But, then you also have that kind of opportunity that what ends up happening with small groups in Eve, right? Like what always ends up happening, they get farmed. But if someone tries to farm them, well, now we get to get involved, right? Like, oh, so and so wants to come and try to farm some of these small groups. Well, now we can just drop the hammer on them, right? Like, so it's like kind of, go and have some fun and do your thing. And, but if anyone bigger gets involved, then, we'll be the riot police and come in and
I'd
take care of
love
it.
to see a group move into Wicked Creek Scouting and establish itself like Tested back in the day and end up becoming bigger and like they drop their own keepstar. They live out there, that where they live. I would love for that. Because if you look at these groups up north, all those people that moved into Vale, Tribute, etc., all these small groups are forming 60, 70, 80, 100-man fleets. And I know PL is up there farming them because PL, and I know that Snuffed Out's up there now because there's some good fights up there. But they've been holding their ground. I've read yet to see a fight where they've like insanely lost. They've been doing pretty good, and that what that shows me is that that group up there is going to either become into a force and become the owners of that region for the futures to come, or some other big alliance is going to be like, "Hey, I'm busy, or I'm not busy right now. Let's move all the supers out here and steamroll these guys." But by the way, the North is happening right now with Horde and NC and PL all against GOTG. It seems like all these small groups they have an area to breathe, so or not. They're able to sit there and not worry about the big blocks coming and messing with them. They have to worry about their neighbors, the ones that live a constellation over from them, not the big blocks.
Indeed, that is, I think, somewhat of how when CCP initially designed nullsec and they designed all these little constellations and everything. I suspect they wanted little corporations to control constellations, not coalitions controlling sections of the map in terms of multiple regions. But I have a bit of an odd question. So, looking at this war, the way it ended surprised me. When the defense of the Keepstar happened in O3 TAC, and Fraternity had that big rallying cry, everybody showed up and they defended their Keepstar, it seemed to me like they sort of caught their breath again. So the narrative in my mind was they were on the defensive for a while. Pandemic Horde PL came down. They did a counterattack. It was mildly successful, but it seemed to run out of steam. And then Legacy just started hammering hard, going back. Blackout kicked in. ADMs fell. Fraternity was definitely, or Winter Coalition was definitely on the back foot then. But then it seemed like they stopped. They digged their heels and they're like, okay, we can hold this now. And then it just, whew, everything, the rug was pulled out from under them. That was surprising to me. I'm wondering if Ron Seddow, if anything else, maybe in the strategic sense, maybe a small tactical thing, did anything about this war surprise you?
You're not wrong in the fact that this ended up wrapping up quicker, or they collapsed quicker than me and Billy both anticipated. They hit the they collapsed way quicker than we anticipated it to happen. To be honest, I think the big thing is they called everyone for a UALX style event that you can't do that for events that are like not starting to happen because we can just let it go and then reinforce it again tomorrow in EU time zone when they can't do anything about it. And then what are they going to do? Like sit there and call everyone again? You just can't for fights that are so like in UALX when we were anchoring the Keepstar, the second one or the first one, sorry, that's something that the attackers at the time had to respond to, or it changes the tide of the war. Armor timer, yeah, you got to form big, but you can't guarantee that they're going to go for it because they can just punt it and then come for it another time. It's not a guaranteed like sort of fight aspect. An anchoring keepstar is, or it's a dead keepstar. A structure timer is either a fully repaired keepstar or a dead keepstar. An armor timer is a structure timer or a punt and re-ref the next day. You can't call everyone to board for something that's not guaranteed to happen like that, or else your line members just don't trust you. Because the way Norris was saying it all is that this is the end, this could be the end of the war. This could be everything right here. And we're just like, okay, guys, we're gonna try to get this iHub, and we'll see what we can do. And then they formed that big, and we're like, oh, well, we'll just ref everything else. They took a misstep, and it caused them to collapse very, very quickly.
So the
I
quick collapse was also surprising to you. Ron, was anything in particular surprising to you?
well, I would say that the 2 weeks leading up to that, right? So I kind of felt that they were building momentum on the offense. They had a couple of great fights where they had won the objectives, and Pandemic Horde was showing up in bigger numbers, and PL was ramping up at the same time. Elo started streaming. Like everything was like apples for them. Like everything was looking great. And I found, there was like this momentum, and I was like, oh man, this thing is going to go on for months and months and months. And then they pushed out, right? Then they pushed down into that SLV pocket and had those three battles, right, where they were pushing forward and going on the offense. And and then we won those three objectives, and then that kind of stopped that momentum. That's like the feeling that I got, right, which was um, that we won those objectives. They didn't get those forts online, and from there it was like, well, kind of faltered a little bit, and then their O3 Keepstar, which was you know uh, to their credit, like if they didn't defend it, we would have taken that, right? So it's like such a rough position to be in, because if they didn't defend it, we would have taken it. They did defend it, so we didn't take it, but we just took everything outside of it, right? So it's a rough position, and if it was like a UALX style event, they should have stayed, right? They should have fought out. They should have, the barbarians are at the gate, right? And just, pulled everything out, because, the one thing is like getting 250 or 300 people down to help you. But if you get them down to help you and they just sit there, for 5 or 6 hours, like they're not going to have a great time. They probably won't be coming back, anytime soon, right? But if you send them out and you get in good fights and all that stuff, then they're more willing to come back.
That's what ended up happening because we had ref the Tatar and Sotiyo that were on good with the Keepstar the same day, and they all came out between a 4 or 5 hour time span, and the IHUB timer was like 2 hours prior. So they stayed form up for 7 hours and sat in their stage and did nothing. So it was a really, really bad morale hit for them. If you look back, a lot of this war was their defense was solid. They had a great defense. The war lasted this long because they had great defense. But if you look back at it, a lot of the key turns that pushed the war in our favor or allowed for the first iHub and Detorid to drop were because of tactical decisions for something for them to go for something else over their iHub or over the actual current objective. Or it was, oh, we don't really need that. We're going to focus on this instead. If you go back to the first iHub we took, BOZ1, I was seeing that our Titan jumped instead of bridging. They decided to go everything in on the Titan fight there in RZ Tech. When they tried to dread bomb the Titan, they put about 100 dreads on the Titan. And so while we were dealing with that, we were running in Toasts in the background, and they piled everyone into RZ Tech 1 there. And they piled everyone there and said, we're going to kill as many Titans as we can right here. And they ended up only killing one. But you know, we ended up being able to knock the Boz IHub out because they were so focused on that. Again, for the O3 tech thing, they were so focused on the O3 tech, Keepstar, and all the timers in there that they weren't thinking, oh shit, we still have 40 systems to the left of us that we need to defend. But we also need to protect the stuff in O3 tag. It's just decisions that changed the goal of the fleet, or the goal of the temporary goal. Hey, let's go for this Titan instead of trying to save the iHub, or let's go block this system off instead of blocking this system off. Those small tactical decisions ended up having a big reason for how the wars changed. Because if we didn't take Boz in the start, we probably would not be here. We would not be in the same position we're in now, um, if we didn't get Boz back then. Because Boz was the first brick in the wall to fall, and the rest of them just started coming after that.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
another thing is, winter co's, or I would say more specifically, Elo's Entosis game is solid, man. Like his small little hit gangs running around, trying to deal with that is, he is so good at that. His Entosis game is just, top notch. And then, PL, right? Headliner's strategy game with, the constant troll toasting. Like that was, I was like, wow, man, that's really irritating. Like we should do that. So then we started doing that, and I think, as maybe they've learned a couple things that we've learned from them as well, and I think that kind of, um, we'll all take those into the next war, right?
Yeah, it was a very good learning experience. Very good. You know, a lot of people didn't cover this war. There wasn't a lot of coverage over it, except for like the big fights, but there were a lot of small like fights that happened where there'd be 60, 70 billion ISK and hacks lost, or in Munins lost, that people wouldn't cover. There were a lot of good fights down here. Maybe they're not in the EU and US prime times. They're in these weird time zones, but they were good fights, and we learned a lot of, especially me, from being put in the big boy seat and being told, "Hey, guide us in the way we need to go to win." It was great learning experience for me. I learned a lot of stuff that I would have never learned otherwise, and it's furthered my experience and my position and the stuff I can do. So it ended up being a great war. The war's not over yet till they're out of cash, but it feels like it's over.
Yeah, it was one of the things I was telling Ron as we were deep into the war is there were actually too many good fights, like for it to be covered well. Because every single day it felt like there wasn't just one 70, 60 billion-isk fight. There were like two or three. One in like USTZ, one in late EUTZ or whatever, maybe one in Chinese time zone, but usually not. And so it seemed like if we covered every single one of those, we couldn't cover literally anything else. I'm like, Ron, you guys need to be less active. That way, when you do have these fights, they stand out more. Because as it is, your great stuff is happening, but it all looks the same because everything is so great. All right, let's go ahead.
I was going to say, Seddow, you'll crack up over this. We were talking, Artemis and I were talking, and Artemis was like, "Hey, man, you guys need to do something dramatic down there. Really, you got to do something dramatic." And the very next day, we dropped the QLPX keepstar. I said, "Hey, Artemis, you said something dramatic, man." He's like, "What?"
We were planning on holding the Keepstar for a different system we were planning on trying to take, but it was a pain to get that system. And QLPX hit 3, and we looked at it more, and we're like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's drop it in QLPX. We can move it later if need.
You mentioned real quick QLPX hit 3. Are you referring to the ADMs drop down to
The
3?
strategic
Strategic
index.
index.
When we owned QLPX at the time, so once the strategic index hit 3 and we could jam the system ourselves, um, we had no reason not to drop a Keepstar because we needed to move forward. We needed um, with how the jammers were, we needed to have a larger and deeper umbrella than where we were in '08, and QOPX allowed us to do that.
Awesome. So we mentioned a bit earlier on in the show when we were discussing sort of the things happening further up north that there's been a bit of a grudge match happening up in the northern side of the map. Specifically, we're talking in the Tenal area. It appears that Northern Coalition is now deployed up there. The current residents are renters or associates of some sort of Guardians of the Galaxy, or formerly known as Guardians of the Galaxy, now dead Coalition. And there have been quite a few fights happening up there. Definitely some skirmish. Definitely like Pandemic Horde's been up there blopsing around quite a bit, at least in the venal area. But there was a relatively, or actually a massive fight, I should say, that occurred just today, where significant numbers of dreads died on both sides. Ron, were you there, around? Do you have a story here?
So I wasn't around. Seddow probably knows more than me. I was just watching Pando's stream and just talking to him. He was there streaming it, and just I just loved it, man. Like I mean, number one, I'm just so glad that Pando's finally in a war and not over harassing us. That's number one. And number two, like how like just dropping so many dreads, right? Like for both sides, right? Like that's just amazing. And they kept coming back. NC kept coming back and kept coming back. Like, oh, I loved it.
Yeah,
But
the
I
Seddow,
numbers for
was
those who
you were
haven't
like
seen.
aware of it, right? Right off the bat
yeah,
or
I
something.
was I was hovering over the ping button the whole time, to be honest, because we didn't know how it was going to escalate at all. I got home. I knew of the timer happening. I'd been poked by a few people saying, "Hey, we could use your help here," or "Hey, do you want to shoot these guys?" And we hadn't really picked or affiliated with the side yet. But I had a worm cold connection ready to go. I had poked a few people, and I was basically watching Pando stream too to see it happening. I was in back channels talking to people, and I saw the caps come on grid. I'm like, huh, I wonder how if they're actually going to go through with it. And then I saw the dreads and I saw the counter dread. And I'm like, okay, is this going to go any further? And that's when it started getting serious. Like, okay, I had typed a ping out. I was like, as soon as I see something go here, I'm pinging and we're going. Um, and in hindsight, I wish I made it to that fight because it seemed really good. It was one of those. There's not much tie dye. There's no Titan bullshit. It was just straight capital on capital, dreadalts on dreadalts. If you look, GOTG actually outtraded the NC dreads. They had about 90 to the 96 NC dreads, and they outtraded them, which was a good thing to see. Um, but it was interesting how the fight happened. There wasn't a big Stuka fleet. It was big enough to bomb a hack fleet, but it wasn't anything crazy. It was about 60, 70 from Pando. But it was hack on hack, carriers on hacks, dreads drawn dreads. It was a great fight to watch. I wish I could have been there, but it just wasn't the place or time for it to happen. We had other stuff happening, and there was no reason for us to go up there unless it escalated more than it already did.
Looking at the Butcher's Bill here, we had Northern Coalition lost, or the PanFam side, so to speak, lost 308 billion, or pardon me, 306 billion, worth most of that in Dreadnoughts, as we mentioned before. And then the Darkness or Dead Coalition side only lost 174 billion. It's worth noting that there's been a bit of a discussion happening in various chat channels about who won, quote unquote, because the timer that it was fought over was saved by Dead Coalition, and the ISK war was won by Dead Coalition. But the field was held, in other words, at the very end, the fleet left standing on grid was the PanFam fleet, and so they got to loot the field. And so people have been stirring up some drama regarding, oh, we still get to claim victory, what have you. Guys, like, good fight. See you tomorrow. Let's handle this
There
professionally.
were future fort. There were three other forts, I think, around like 1900, 2000. But GOTG didn't respond to them because literally fatigue. Literally the jump fatigue from all their dreads. They didn't have the fatigue. They didn't have the jump ability needed to do those, and they just wanted to break. I know in an hour or two, three Astras are supposed to come online in their staging keepstar system, just like the little Astra that could. And I know both sides have been pre-pinging that, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But if you it was a good fight and I'm really happy it happened. I was talking to Sword, Killaby, and a few other people about how the Sino changes affected it. If you watch Panda's video, you can see the Widow warp in, who's the hard Sino for the GOTD dreads, and he tanks it. He stays alive for a solid minute or two before dying. And then according to Sword, it was them trying to scramble Sino rapiers and Sino recons on the grid to get the rest of the dreads in who didn't make it, or reinforcement dreads. So it was really interesting because it was a proper fight where the Sino changes had taken full effect in a full escalation battle. The only escalation path we're missing is the super escalation there. But I think that the super escalation wouldn't really affect those Sino recons or Sino blops any more than this did. I think this is what the future of escalation paths is going to look like.
That's some interesting insights there. I know regarding the whole progression of what could be another decent sized skirmish up there in the north, up there in Tenal, with Pandemic Horde no longer significantly involved in the Southern War because that is wrapping up. That remains the question, okay, well, will Pandemic Horde be able to shift even more focus towards Tenal? And on that note, it has been reported that a significant member of Pandemic Horde Alpha Star Pilot is taking a break, so to speak, from the game to deal with some real life stuff. He was the one who's in charge of Horde Vanguard, if memory serves, and that was the group that was deployed down south with the Southern War, helping out Fraternity, the big offensive push that they had success with. And so if there is a concern about them going back up and adding more gusto to this Northern Coalition grudge match in Tenal, I don't think that's going to be the case, simply because the leader, so to speak, of this smaller group within Horde is taking a break from the game. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Ron.
You know, the first thing is Alpha Star Pilot, take a break, man. Like always, always, always real life first, always. We'll be here when you get back. Don't even worry, man. Some things, some lines may be drawn in different places, but always take breaks. It's good for you. Yeah, and it was the partisans, right? And the partisans were down at
Yes, thank you.
HLW, and they were helping, and doing some mentosing, and they showed up to some timers, and they were doing pretty well. They went back up north. I think what's interesting about a fight like that is, and like Seddow said that, we haven't like chosen a side or whatever, but like I would hate to go and like jump on the winning side. You know what I mean? Like I would hate to do that because then you just look like, dogpiling, and I hate that. So it would have been fun if we saw like GOTG like really winning, just to go and shoot GOTG until they were losing, and then shoot PanFam until they were losing. That would have been fun,
Can I
right?
take
Like
us on a bit
truly
of a
third
Really
party.
tangent
determine
real
that in a
quick?
fight like that.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
there room for a quote unquote honorable third party in EVE 2K19? Like we already mentioned earlier in the show that if a third party shows up to your area of battle, you shoot them first because you don't want them coming in. You don't want them coming in with your allies, putting pressure on you. And then also, if you're that third party coming in, well, who do you fight for? Do you join the winning side, or do you fight for the underdogs and just lose? And also, there's all the sort of political machinations happening at the same time. Like, are third parties, in their truest sense, not viable anymore in the nullsec field of battle?
I'm not really going to expand on that because I could go for hours on that. But I will say, though, I think that Horde is probably going to get more involved after today, especially. If you look back, all the capitals on grid were NCs. Horde only came with subcaps. And the way Horde's been pre-pinging some stuff, seems like that's the place they want to be. It's not China time zone. It's not dead time zone. It's Horde prime time zone. So I would not. I would 100% not be surprised if I see them over there more, especially if they move capitals over there. All the caps that died were Northern's coalition caps, no others. So if Horde Dreads were there, that's a different fight altogether.
Right on. Speaking of Northern Coalition, there was recently an interesting incident happening in, of all places, Delve. So there was reportedly a spy in the Imperium. I don't know which corporation or alliance in particular it was in, but it did have control to transfer ownership of a Sotiyo. And so a Sotiyo in the system of YOM or YTAC OMTZ was transferred into Northern Coalition's hands, right in the middle of Delve. Of course, like in the middle of Delve, it got hit with the entire Goonswarm Federation, or at least a significant portion of it, their super capital fleet, and died. But in the meantime, it produced quite a amount of interesting content. If you're a fan of Extra Squishy or DTM or those sort of streamers, I'm sure you've seen the shenanigans happening in and around this Sotiyo. But it's something that I love to see happen. I'm sure Ron is not particularly happy about it because of all the spy nature of it, but I'm happy. It was amusing. I quite enjoyed all of the streaming and video content that was produced as a result of this.
I loved
Uh,
it. I do. I loved it. I love Squishy. I love his content. Him having access to Sotiyo, seeing the video uploaded every day for 2 minutes, just pure laughing is fucking funny.
So Total Broski in chat is saying that he wasn't a spy, that he was kicked due to inactivity, and he was mad about it, so he rage transferred it. Now, that makes sense, to be honest. That completely makes sense.
They forgot to
Uh,
remove one of his characters that still had director access, so he just transferred it the next day.
Wow. That is some awesome intel there.
but and they fed like they died to it. Like that's
Oh
just
yeah, like multiple caps,
It
carriers,
was the little
dreadnoughts.
Sotiyo that could.
oh my
Yeah!
god. Oh my god.
Ron, you need to subscribe to this here YouTube channel, just saying. You don't know what you're missing. Sometimes you need to mute the videos. It gets a little bit too exciting for my taste, but the content is generally hilarious. Alright, let's move on to some other things that have been happening in and around New Eden. We mentioned Huge Cap Brawl and Tenal, also the Delve Sotiyo that went over to Northern Coalition, but CCP is in the news again. Today we have 2 bits of news from them. First of all, in case you haven't yet, there is still time. Log in and do your dailies. The skilling spree has returned yet again, so you can log in, you can do one of a randomized set of activities, and receive a certain allotment of skill points for them. So that is nice. I know a lot of people were happy about that when it came around, people comparing it to the dailies and whatnot. Whatever, it's skill points if you need them. It's skill points if you don't, and it's people logging into the game and getting out in space, which I think I'm the biggest fan of.
I have a quick question about that. Let's say you have an industry alt with very low combat skills, and he happens to live in nullsec. How do you get those kills? Asking for a friend.
Frigate rats in asteroid belts. You fit up a Nerus and throw some light drones on that thing.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, you know, like the Sino Nerus fit that doesn't work anymore because they can't fit Sinos? Well, industrial Sinos don't count, but yeah, do that.
I have a bunch of those. The Entosis, I use them for Entosis, right? So yeah, I have a couple hundred of them. All right.
A couple hundred, you say? Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And Seddow knows, like I have hundreds
Yeah,
of these ships.
yeah. You have
Like
hundreds
no
more, so
joke.
I've seen the screenshot.
Alright, let's move on to some other news. It created quite a bit of drama when it first dropped. The minutes for the CSM14 summit that happened a few weeks ago have finally been released. I say finally, they've been released relatively quickly after the summit. Shout out to CCP for getting those out to us quickly and formatting them extremely well. Like, these are fantastic notes, despite what some people's opinions of their content may be. So once again, CCP Spider doing good work there. If you haven't read them, I highly suggest you give it a read. It is 69 pages, but if you are as dedicated to EVE Online as many people seem to be, it's definitely worth your time. I would caution you, if you listen to a number of other EVE podcasts or read Reddit, there's been some overreaction, in my opinion, to some of the stuff that was stated here. Definitely, if you're
Just say
getting
it
worked
lightly.
up, if you're getting worked
Just
up,
say it
go to
lightly.
the source and double check some facts.
I think it's just all the heat from Blackout and the Sino changes carried over into the minutes. I personally haven't read them. I've just seen what's been on Reddit. But to be honest, the past 6 months, correction, for a very long time, Reddit has been something I don't take too seriously. Unless it's like a serious post on there, it's just always been like, overreactions or something that's just way out of context that people are like, oh, this looks interesting. Let's hit the upvote button. Then it makes it the front page and it's what everyone sees. Reddit just works against us, in my opinion.
Unless you're recruiting blues, then it's useful.
You're
Not
not wrong.
blues, pardon me. Not blues, just not hostiles.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Hey, you got to be on good terms with your buddies. We're on good terms with Pravi, but they're not blue. I go
Yeah,
and shoot them every now and then.
Pravi are good people. Pravi are good people.
You know, like reading like the CSM, like the minutes, yeah, they didn't strike me, their format or their content or anything. It just was like a design meeting, right? Like, and I've held thousands of those, right, in my career or whatever. And talking to experts, you kind of, shoot ideas and you kind of brainstorm about things. But like when like I was working on like the stylus, reactions like at Microsoft, and I was talking to like professional cartoonists, right? And I'm like asking all these crazy things. I could only imagine if someone was like taking those notes and gave them to like the cartoonist, and the cartoonist like, who are these idiots? Who is this guy? He has the like, but you're just kind of like floating ideas around and you're trying to get stuff out and you're banging ideas off. Like I didn't see why everyone was freaking out. I actually thought it was like a little hilarious. I mean, there's only one thing worse than a meeting, and that's someone that isn't in the meeting to tell you how to run the meeting. I think that's I don't know. I thought they were actually really good, and I thought it was very cool that they do those kind of detailed minutes and give them to us. I thought it was very cool.
I'm not gonna lie, I was having a bit of a panic attack when there was what appeared to be a serious discussion of just straight up removing logistics from the game, at least from certain parts of the game, which logistics is still one of my favorite things to do in this game. So CCP, don't you dare remove it, and Dunk Dinkle, thank you very much for defending the Logibro honor. But apparently it was all in sarcasm, so gotta love when text doesn't do that well. Alright, let's move on here. That's all of the content we have for today as far as news from EVE Online, news from CCP, and now we're going to transition into a little segment we like to call Something You Might Not Know. This is where the hosts and the guests, sometimes I remember to remind them, sometimes I don't, like in this particular case, try to tell the audience something they might not know in and around EVE Online. It could be lore, could be mechanics, could be history of some random group in EVE. It's up to you. For me in particular, I have one which is a very clickbaity title. The title is Infinite Corp Bookmarks. If you're a member of Pandemic Horde, you already know about this, but the rest of EVE maybe not. So, for those unaware, with the current mechanics surrounding Corp bookmarks, you can only have 500 of them. And that can be quite restrictive depending on the size of your group. However, there's a trick that you can use to get unlimited Corp bookmarks, and that is you create a bookmark, but you create it in your personal bookmarks, and then you edit that bookmark and change the folder drop down from personal into whatever corporate folder you want to put it in, and click save. And boom, now that bookmark is in Corporation Bookmarks, even if you already have more than 500. So you can have an infinite number of Corporation Bookmarks. It just requires a few extra clicks when you're creating it. That is my
Aren't we
something you
getting
might not know.
shared bookmarks too soon? Isn't that the
Yeah,
thing?
absolutely. That's why I wanted to get this tip out quick, because it's about to go away. In fact, if you read the minutes, there's quite a lot of discussion surrounding the shared bookmarks, how they're going to be managed using ACLs, and awesome stuff like that. All right, how about Ron? Do you have something our audience might not know?
You know, I was thinking about something in Tosis, but I want to say something obvious.
Of course. What
um,
did I expect? God damn it.
so, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something obvious that whenever I do it on stream, like there's always people that ask me what it is. So you can move to a specific point, within, like 100 kilometers around you, up or down, or any direction by holding down Q, right? So if you hold down Q, you have a direction line that comes out, and then you click the mouse, and then you'll go up and down, and then you release Q, and it'll go to that point. You know, a lot of times you would just point into a direction and then just stop your ship, but that will take you to a very specific point and then just hold you there. But now for the real, so about Entosis, no, I'm just kidding.
Oh, we're gonna have to wait for next show, aren't we? I'm gonna hold you to it, Ron. I want to hear a really good Entosis something you might not know next week. All right? I'm
Next
prepared.
week we'll have the
We're ready.
Entosis Power Hour with Seddow and
Dear God, I'm tired of Tosis, man. Been doing it for fucking 8 months now. What is it? 8 months? Yeah, something like that.
Is this the longest in my history of playing Eve? This is the longest war I know of. Is there a longer one for you older folks?
Well, I don't think so because I've only been playing the game for about 3, 4 years. But you know, as
uh,
far as I can understand, I think this is the longest war in a while. If you can take into consideration of it, all depends on when you define the start date. To be honest.
Well, that's the reason I like this one. It had a very set start date. Like the NIP ended, but shortly before that, it was sort of canceled real quick. That was the start. That's when it happened, and then everything after that, up until I would say like right now ish, you could say is near the end of the war. But even still, we are safely well beyond the length of any of the wars in my memory, at least, which is pretty cool. Congratulations to you guys for coming out on the winning side. I realize we haven't said that yet, but you know.
you know, we're all winners, right? Like
We
we
all
all
had
got a bunch of
fun.
good fights. It's all fun, man. Like
I've
what
seen
you
the
know, sitting around
winter coat.
crabbing, like like it was great, man.
I've seen the winter coat channels and their general channels. I know they've been having.
You cut out there. But
I was gonna say I've seen the channels. I know they've had fun at some moments. Maybe they aren't having fun now, but they've definitely had fun another time.
I'm wondering, it just occurred to me, what happens to Origin Dot now? Does their contract with Fraternity end? Does Black Legion reform? Speculation? Thoughts? Concerns? How about this? Seddow, you got something our audience might not know?
I could, but it's not something that everyone should know.
Oh,
I
Well,
don't
hit
know.
us
Oh,
with
I
it.
have my speculations. I think they're gonna go back up north. I've seen that Elo and Pando have become good buddies recently. Um, they've been talking in some places and doing some stuff. So I would not be surprised if they became best friends and um, Origin join in it. That's an option. Or he goes and reforms Black Legion and becomes blue within it and tag teams in all the fights up north, right next to where Black Legion used to live and where their K3G their staging is, which is K3J. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes up there and participates in that. From my perspective, as an FC, looking onto how Elo's been doing the past month or so, he's just done. He's done with fraternity. I may be wrong in this, but he stopped FCing for about a month, and I knew he was still online at his computer. Um, from my eyes, he's done and wants to go somewhere else. I may be wrong. Only he can really know. But that is my speculation.
All right. Is
I
that
I think Elo's got it good, man. I think you know he's got a lot of bodies behind him. You know, I don't know. I think the you have to like if you go a year back and you look at the fraternity from when we first started fighting them to them now, it is a massive, massive difference. I mean, it was, you know, weird back then. But now, I mean, it's solid. Like they're doing, you know, great fleets. The Elo's on it. Like I don't know. I think Elo's got it pretty good. I think you know, that if they go and they take a couple of months and crab it up and uh, who knows, you know, maybe they'll, you know, move over and take over GOTG's space or something. I don't know. I don't know. I think there's going to be some good things come from him.
I definitely know as a result of like the standings between Horde and PanFam and Fraternity, and because Origin Dot was within Fraternity, like those blue standings meant that all of the Origin structures up in North, up in Venal, Tenal area, they're still there for the most part. At least in the Venal area, I saw a lot of them when I was up there deployed with Horde. So if
Yeah,
that is
but
something they're
they're all
considering,
still in venal. And I think honestly that's where I would see them going next, reforming Black Legion or why dotting into some other alliance. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I'm just trying to say that yeah, they're still up there. I know they're up there. They haven't been touched.
right on. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of Talking in Stations. It was episode 35 of the Invasion expansion. Thanks again to RonUSMC, my co-host, and a special thanks to my special guest, Seddow, for joining us. Once again, he is a Sky Marshal for Test Alliance Please Ignore Legacy Coalition as a whole. Thank you very much for your time and your insights on today's episode. And with that, you guys can catch us again next week, same time, 23:59 Eve time on Wednesdays. We also have an upcoming show this Sunday at 1600 UTC. I'm not sure if our guest list is public yet, but if you're interested in the topics we've touched on today, you're definitely going to be interested in the topic of the Sunday show. Like, it has a fantastic guest list and a fantastic subject matter to cover. So I would definitely, you're not going to want to miss this show, guys. All right, with that, special shout out to our new show that just launched, Mad Isk by Lichgrave. He had his first episode. It should be going out in audio form, but right now it's at least up in video on Twitch and YouTube. Go and check it out. It's about missions. All right, enough shilling. That'll do it for this episode. See you next time.